Number one. Oh, well, number one, I was trying to beat you to it. Why is the screen blinking? Either I'm really losing weight from all this jogging I'm doing, or I'm just getting old. Because I'm too vain. I'm like, oh my God, I'm getting one of those necks. But I think it's from doing my vocal exercises. So
That was a strange move.
Yes. Oh, I learned that from Jim Seitzer. That guy created the Barbell Band. He's an amazing singer. I think in 1978 he won Mr. Ohio. Jim, correct me if I'm wrong, and he won like a powerlifting title for the United States and another like bodybuilding. He was like one of the first people to do both powerlifting and bodybuilding and win titles. Guy's amazing. No Schwarzenegger and all them. And he taught me this move. So my neck looks like it. But it really strengthens your muscles so that you don't grip when you sing higher.
It looks like a strange breakdancing move. That's all I gotta say.
Hey, maybe I could be in the Olympics.
No, it's out of the Olympics. Anyways, welcome back to the Always Right podcast.
Oh yeah, welcome back. Oh, we doing a podcast?
Yes, we're doing a podcast.
Okay.
So today we are myself, author Karisa DeLay, and Jaime Vendera here. We're going to actually cover a topic. Pterodactyl. We're going to cover a topic that Jaime thought might be kind of boring.
Yeah, at first I thought it was boring until, I read your 5,000 notes on it. And I thought, actually, people need to know this. Yeah. So we're talking about prose. And I'm not talking about pros and cons. Yeah, writing prose. Yeah, well, the pros and cons of prose. But
yeah, not a pro, because it's not called a pro.
No.
Yeah, it's not.
Never do that. Yeah. Like, here's my, there's a prose. Oh, look at all my prose. No. Nose. That's not right.
Nose. Those are not my prose. All right. All right, so writing prose. So what is this, Jaime? What you study my notes? Tell us what it is.
Okay, I'm not even going to read them. I'm going to say prose is more like it's just natural language. When you're writing a story, it could be fiction, it could be nonfiction, it could be essay. Why would we need to stipulate what prose is? Because we also have poems. We have songs, and when you have poems, there's a rhyming pattern, there's a rhyme scheme, there's a meter to it. When you're writing songs, there's phrasing, and there's a lot of words that end, like you don't rhyme all the time. It's a crime. That's what I tell my songwriters. But you do have a lot of rhyming. We're not thinking that when we're writing a fiction novel or an essay or a how-to book. We're just trying to write conversational. But we're trying.
I don't think. Correct me. I'm almost how-to books technically aren't prose. There's like a borderline with them, like educational, descriptive. Like if you're engaging the reader about a how-to, that's different than you're just basically giving an instructional manual. Instructional manuals like that are not considered prose.
Well, I guess some of them could be because, like, when I wrote "Raise Your Voice," I keep it very conversational, and I'm telling stories within it.
Yeah, that's different. That's a different type of
kind of a how-to, and I can see where you're saying that's the fine line, because it's but how to fix a car motor. Yeah, that would not be prose.
Yeah, because unless you're telling like stories and you're creating this whole like outline of this narrative structure for it, that's different.
Yeah, and I think with all my how-to books, I probably shouldn't even call them. I'm kind of stay in that lane. I always try to incorporate stories, so it's more like a life lesson.
Right.
So it's very, very descriptive, and I'm sure we'll get in because there's all kinds of different prose. I'm sure we'll get into that here shortly.
Yeah.
So I know we will since I read your notes.
And if you didn't catch it before, to clarify, it is not a prose. It is it's very distinct from a verse. It is, you're utilizing these structures, these narrative formats to kind of create a flow in your storyline. Like you said, it's a natural language. I feel like that's when I'm writing. I feel like is this a natural form of writing when I'm doing conversations in someone's head? We've discussed this before. Is this something I would say to myself if your character's thinking in their head? Is this something you naturally would say?
Yeah, I think we both do that, and I think, I still try to keep it poetic in a sense that there is this flow. To the way that I write. I mean, you've read some writers and you're like, way too descriptive or too detailed to where you about fall asleep, or they'll use really, we said this earlier before we came on here, $5 words to throw them out there. And it's like, so, that would still be prose, but you want to have a style.
Well, so something that when I was reading with prose is, it's very separate from song, theater, poetry. that has a different structural, like, that is like the rhyme schemes and all that predetermined like stuff that you do when you're creating a song. Whereas when you're writing for prose in nonfiction or fiction, you're engaging your reader. You're creating something that engages your reader. It's more about like,
It's elegance.
yes, but like at the same time, I feel like there's that. So when I'm writing a story, I will read it out loud to hear the flow. And when I go to a sentence, did I lose the flow of going into the next sentence? Like, and I'll go back. I'm like, okay, I need something between this sentence and this sentence to create that rhythm. Even though it's like, oh, I'm just putting stuff in there. There has to be a connection as your story builds to engage your reader, or you'll lose your reader. And if you have too many descriptive words, which writing Canvas recently, I was writing this paragraph and I'm like, oh my gosh, there's so many words here. They're all great words. That's the problem. They're all great words. So put them to the side and I'll use those later because I've got a whole story I can use these. But I took a lot of them out because I'm like, I don't need to describe every single noun. You know what I mean? Because I feel
Yeah.
like you lose your flow, and you become too wordy. And then your prose is just what
Your
your
prose grows. That's what I thought you were
your
going to
prose
say.
grows.
I think you hit the nail on the head when you said you read it out loud. I believe it was Rich that said that to me. If you can't read a paragraph and someone can follow along, then
Mm-hmm.
it's not elegant. It's not flowing. Because there is even though we're not rhyming, there is a poetic flow to a
Yeah.
really good writer.
Yeah, even though poetry is not a prose, I shouldn't have said that. Even though poetry is not in the realm of prose, it is still a flow. I'm like,
It
I'm
still flows.
close.
It will have to be poetry.
Yes, yes,
Can we
yes.
add that to the list? No, I'm teasing.
Would we call it flowetry?
Flowetry, proetry, I don't care.
Yes, we're doing
Oh,
that.
yeah, fiction we could call flowetry. I
Fiction
love it.
is flowetry.
I love it.
Flowetry.
We need to
When we
write it.
make up words, I get to make up how they're spelled too.
Yes, flowetry. I don't have to use that in a novel.
Yes. All right. Okay. Something listen, I'm not a grammatical person. I will be the first one to tell you I'm terrible grammar. Someone said something the other day. They said, "Did you know that this is spelled wrong on that thing?" I'm like, "Oh, really?" And they literally said to me, "I thought you were an author." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm not an editor.
Yeah, I don't
Like,
have
I'm
that
not my
problem.
own personal editor." So,
I've never made a typo in my life, so we're good.
right, I have text messages to prove that one wrong. I'm sure your talk to text is like, "What's this guy saying?" Your AI is
That's
like,
why I said when I texted you the other day, so we have to do an episode on text to speech.
that would
Maybe
be
I will
fun.
learn something and I will learn to slow down, period, before I go into the next sentence, period.
I would agree. I need to do that as well. All right.
I don't really see many typos from you, though. I'm like, I'll,
Well,
I'll,
that
I'll
would
text you,
probably
like,
be because my AI can understand my words.
mine can't because I'm half Kentuckian. Not really. I could just see it from my house.
No, mine messes up. Mine messes up a lot. Where I'm like, what? Why did it say that? I don't know. All
You
right.
have a great sentence here to use the word prose, and that's why I said elegant, because you say the author skillfully crafted her thoughts into elegant prose that captivated readers from the very first page. And that's a great way to use it. That's flowetry. That sentence reads so smooth and pulls me in. I just
Something.
want to say that.
Well, thank you. Well, I felt like I needed to put it into a sentence in order for it to make sense. Sometimes, like when you're doing a spelling bee, you're like, "Can you use that in a sentence?" I'm like, "How does using it in a sentence make you spell it right?" I don't understand that one.
Yep. I'd be like, at a library, you got any more than prose? So,
Yeah. Do you want tic tacs? No, I want prose.
uh,
So this something I learned while I was researching this is what a mass noun is. Do you know what that is?
no, I seen that in there. I was like, wow, that's the first time I've read that.
Yeah, I didn't know what a mass noun was, but indicating that you don't have to use it in plural form. So those are the ones that don't have a plural. They're singular and plural at the same time. I didn't even know that's what that was called. Because people are like, oh, look at them deers. It's not a word.
It's look at them deer.
Those
Z-
deer. Yeah.
Yeah. Likewise, to refer to multiple prose works. Yes, I'm reading your sentence. You might use a phrase like the collection of prose. So like, would
Yeah,
that be
you
like
would
if I
just
had,
when you go into the library wanting your prose, you would be describing the
yes,
library of books or
yeah,
an
like
anthology of.
where are your pros on fiction fantasy? You know, or
I would dare you to walk into the library and be like, "I'd like to have the anthology of prose writing, please."
uh, I'll film it.
And they'll be like, "What?"
They'll be like, I just work here.
I don't know. There's some pretty smart librarians.
Yep.
Let's move on to the types.
Tell
There
me my
are.
wife wears glasses. That's what I tell her. She looks like a sexy librarian. Shut up.
Oh, that's funny. All right.
All right.
Let's talk about the types. There is the narrative structure. Prose often will tell story or convey information through coherent structures, like we mentioned, including elements like plot, setting, and characters. So you're not doing that in a how-to book unless you're just like when you do yours, it's different because you're giving the point why you are giving this. You're kind of constructively creating this imagery of what's important, and then you're telling a story of how to raise your voice. You're not necessarily this is what you do. Do. Step one.
Yep.
Yeah.
And everyday language. I mean, every day we speak. We're
Mm-hmm.
speaking in prose, you know, so it's just normal, everyday language, straightforward. It's not poetic. I'm not like, what time shall I chime? I can't even think of any rhyme for that. That's what I'm talking to you. Hey, I did it! I did
Yes.
3 in a row. Didn't make any
Yes.
sense.
No,
My rap game is good.
that's
It must
probably.
be one of those crazy ADHD mornings because I'm can't barely sit in my seat.
I noticed that you got wiggle
Yes.
worms.
Yeah.
And
I
you got
think it's
ants
because I'm
in your
getting back
pants
into
today.
writing. I'm
Ants.
getting, yeah. All right.
All
The
right.
forms.
Yes, so there's a variety of forms. Yes,
Yep.
so we have, and I kind of put some examples of writing underneath each one of these. I went through and found some examples of these types of forms of prose. So go ahead with the first one.
Okay. Expository prose.
Mm-hmm.
This style focuses on explaining or informing. It's commonly used in academic writing, technical manuals, and journalism. I
Right.
thought the sentence was going to carry on. That's why I stopped at
Oh
informing.
yeah, no, you're good.
I have to swear I've read all this, but it's a lot. It's like, wow, I told her right before we got on here, everybody. I'm like, man, you go so deep into this. I love it. I love it. A modern author known for using expository prose is Malcolm Gladwell. In his books such as Outliers, Blink, and The Tipping Point, Gladwell employs an expository style to explore complex ideas and present theories on social dynamics, psychology, and behavior. His writing is characterized by clear explanations, supported by research and anecdotes to inform and engage readers on various topics. So
So
that's why I was talking about it. Like, you know,
with
it's a
the
lesson within.
But it's not like one of those things where it's just giving you a boring. It's engaging your readers. There is a flow to it. It's kind of like when we talked a few weeks ago about my literary review I had to do. There is still a flow to it. You still have to captivate the person on. You're basically reviewing a bunch of stuff you read, is what you're doing. But you have to make it captivating to where the person's like, okay, this is good. This can go towards a research proposal. You have to include that in there. This essay that you're doing and all these you still have to make it engaging to the person who's reading that wants to give you the money. Like, is this something I feel like is going to be interesting enough for me to give you a bunch of money for? So there's different because you're not how-toing. There's still a flow to it. Does that make sense?
Yes, it flows.
Yes.
Prose.
This one I put in here for you, and the book here, the narrative prose. This utilizes a lot of authors are narrative prose in their novels, short stories, and so novellas. This is where the storytelling comes in. This is where you include your plots, your setting, and your character development stuff.
You love
Or
me.
yes,
You love me. Or you want me to read it?
yes, because this is your
Okay.
guy.
I thought she's reading it to me.
It's like
I
a
put this
bedtime
in
story.
Terry Brooks, my favorite fiction author, is known for his work in the fantasy genre, and his prose style predominantly falls under narrative prose. He is well regarded for his rich world building, engaging storytelling, and the use of descriptive language to create vivid fantasy settings and characters. His genre series, for example, features intricate plots and detailed descriptions that immerse readers in the fictional worlds he creates, combining both descriptive and narrative elements to bring his stories to life.
Hmm.
And he's my inspiration for Age of the
Yes.
Sigil.
Yeah, I figured that would be a good one. Descriptive prose, like, and here's the thing. Fun facts. authors can often use way more than one. This is not something that's like you have to stick to one. There is a lot of overlapping, especially when you're creating these mythological worlds and stuff, and you're overlapping creativity with a narration of character setting and plot twists and all these things.
Yeah, especially if you're creating something brand new,
Mm-hmm.
a dragon language or a new type of monster no one's seen before, or the way the houses were built. I kind of did that in Phoenix Earth. I know when the characters came back to Earth, they had these machines called sifters, and
Mm-hmm.
they would find sandy areas like in South America, and they'd plant these machines down on the ground, and they'd vibrate, and the sand from deep would go, and
Mm-hmm.
it'd build up and it'd turn into glass and build walls like
Hmm.
a solid thick. So I had to describe all of this and create this for that world.
And so so the descriptive prose, this is where people are basically, this is like what's the word I'm looking for? Like a companion to the narrative prose. You kind of need that descriptive nature to bring the reader in. So this is the aiming towards the reader. This is what you're using to get that reader to like really want to, read more. But you got to be careful. As we were talking earlier, you've got to be careful with over describing.
Yep.
And this is, you said you just recently watched this, but this book was, I know, pretty big.
Yeah.
Was Where the Crawdads Sing. I think one of my kids read this by Delilah Owens. And this is a book features richly descriptive language that points a vivid, or does that say points yet? Paints.
Yeah.
My notes are way far away. Paints a vivid picture of the natural environment of the North Carolina marshlands, serving as both as a backdrop and as the character in the story. So that's
Yeah.
really cool.
Love the movie. Haven't
Yeah.
read the book, but
Well, my kids read the book. So
yep. My wife read it. She's like, we got to watch this movie. I can't believe it's coming out.
that's cool. All right, persuasive prose used in this is where you get into the essays, like I was talking about with a literature review and the research projects and things like that.
I never thought about it like this, like because you mentioned advertisements here.
Mhm.
Yes, I mean, think about copywriters and how deep and detailed they go to paint the story to get you to want to buy their product.
Right.
And
And we talked earlier that it's not typically theatrical stuff is not considered a prose, but the writing flow could, if that makes sense. Like the creating this engaging advertisement would still kind of fall under that because you're bringing that person in differently.
yeah, I guess the way to look at it is if it's a boring manual like from IKEA to build your desk, or a math book, even if you love math, if it's not pulling in and poetic, if it doesn't flows,
Well,
it's
we
not
say
prose.
that, yeah, we say because we use the word poetic, but at the same time, poetry is not a prose. Songs and poetry,
No, exactly.
people
But
have
I'm like,
verses,
there's a flow. There is
right?
like you said, like when you read a sentence, or two, if it's stuck, and
Mm-hmm.
it drives you nuts. There's too much, like you said earlier. We work with authors, helping them along, and some of them are so over descriptive. I was in the beginning,
Mm-hmm.
and luckily we have Rich, and he's like really edited me down, and you can be too much to where it's just doesn't pull the reader in. It's got to have a flow to it. So I guess I should quit using the word poetic and use flow.
Floetic.
Floetic. We came up with that earlier, right?
No, that was floetry.
All right, floetic.
Floetic.
Floetry. We need it. We're
Listen,
going
we're
to write
gonna
a
have
book.
an Always Right podcast dictionary.
We are. We're actually going to write an Always Right book.
Yeah.
And many volumes, and we will use all these words in there.
Yeah. Okay, so something that I did here was I did two underneath of the persuasive prose because the first one is Sapiens, A Brief History of Mankind. This one is by Yuval Noah Harari. So this is one the
Harari.
Harari.
Ferrari. I don't know.
Yes.
Close enough.
Close enough. I hope I'm not butchering this to the point that it's offensive. Yes, I don't want to offend anybody. But the author uses persuasive prose to present the interpretation of human history, and it compels the readers to consider a look away from the conventional understandings and maybe the societal views of the world, and say maybe this is another idea. And this is where I put prose where before the world was lost. So it's non-fictional persuasive prose where I'm trying to show you a different view. You don't have to take it. It's just a different view using some of the pseudosciences and some of the fringe science stuff that's out there. So, and then Bad Feminist. This seems like something that would be fun to read. By Roxane Gay. This collection of essays employs persuasive prose that discuss feminism, culture, and identity, inviting readers to engage with and reconsider their perspectives of these issues, which I feel like specifically to religion, I think everybody should learn all religions, not because you're trying to persuade them to become a religion, but so you understand others to have a better I feel like you would coexist better. The more I read in my religious studies class about other religions, the more I find like beauty and harmony in humanity. And the ones who aren't willing to like do that, I'm like, sorry.
Creative prose. This is found in various forms of creative writing. This style is characterized by unique voice, imaginative use of language, and innovative structure. I don't want to create a new word there. You chose Circe by Madeline Miller. Madeline Miller. What is wrong with me today? I'm telling you, I need Ritalin.
What is wrong with us every day? What are you talking about?
Miller reimagines the life of the mythological figure Circe with poetic and lyrical prose, blending ancient mythology with modern sensibilities to create a vivid and immersive story. So if that's the case, like, would like the Percy Jackson books that are bringing like the Norse or the gods like Zeus and everybody back, would that fall into creative prose?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the thing. Like I said, a lot of times authors will use more than one. When you're doing that, when you use the creative prose, because you're using some of these mythological things, you're world building, you're taking historical fiction, stuff that's not true, but making it like this happened in history and now this is happening in the foreground. Yep. Yeah, you're doing that. This is where kind of I'm doing with Canvas now with the historical fiction, changing some of the. Yeah, I know. I'm not giving it away. Yes. And I had to call Jaime the other day. I'm like, I need 5 minutes of your time because I can't talk to anybody that doesn't know the plot twists.
No, telling you. I mean, I was happy that you're working on it, but when you changed it, I was like, yeah, okay, this is cool. And it fits you so much better.
Yeah.
Too.
And then the other day, like when we were discussing like this, like, okay, how, like this, it was
I know that was
right.
Yes, it was like,
I love it. I think that when it's out, we should do a pre-order and just push it on here and be like, gotta go pre-order it on the Always Right podcast.
You said something in episode 2 or 3 about Canvas, and you're like, yes, all my friends, I'll use their name, maybe a variation of their name. And now I'm like, I wonder if I've heard a variation of my name already, or if I'm deeper, or I'm like some guy gets killed in one scene. I don't know. I don't know if I'm like a big character or a little character.
This is how I'm going to know if you read the book, because yours is a very like backstory in it to where you're going to be like, I'll know if you read it or not.
Okay.
It's like a test.
If you want to make sure, and we can tell our future authors, if you want to make sure that Jaime reads your book, you have to place him in there as a character, and he's got to search for it. Because
where's Aldo? Where's
Jaime? Yes, where's Vendera?
Vendera. He would be wearing the little red toboggan like Waldo,
and have the red nose and the cheeks.
Yeah,
like
I'm not sure you would look great in stripes though.
No, I don't want to be in stripes or an orange suit.
Right.
All right.
Okay, back on point. Where were we?
Yeah, we're back there.
Okay, we're talking about how the blending of prose. A novel might blend a narrative with a descriptive. Especially when you do this, you get that plot development, and while you're also describing, your descriptive prose just is enriching the story and the emotional undertones that are in your storyline. This is very common. And nonfiction authors might mix the persuasive with the expository and provide more clear explanations of a topic while also arguing a specific point, so there's always that. Creative, like I said, is going to be intertwined in pretty much any of these. That's kind of what makes these prose. I feel like that's almost like the glue. that creative nature to be able to bring the reader in should be overlapped in pretty much all of these.
Yeah, especially if you want it to be considered in nonfiction.
Yeah.
So
The character in prose, character development, especially in fiction, prose allows for the intricate characters and the exploration of their thoughts and their emotions, like I just mentioned. Well, I find that when I'm writing, that I almost have to take a note and remind myself what type of person they are so they don't all become the same person. You know what I mean?
yep.
You want to make sure. And I remember when someone had told me in Crystal Gate, they're like, oh, I know that this character had a very distinguished tone. Like they sounded very like they weren't. No, it wasn't Crystal Gate. It was Canvassed. Actually, one of the people who's read the first chapter, she said one of the characters when he would speak to the victim, he had a very professional sound. Like he didn't sound like he was just some whoever.
Yeah, he wasn't insane. He wasn't, bless you, he wasn't some insane murderer.
Right.
There was intention.
Yeah,
Bless you.
Like, he sounded way
Bless
more
you for the third
sophisticated.
time.
Thank
Because
you.
I know it's going to come.
I feel it. It's there. I'm trying to hold it in. Length and complexity with prose. Do you want to go over that one?
Yeah, prose can vary in length from short paragraphs to lengthy novels, and it can exhibit varying degrees of complexity based on the author's intent. If any of you follow me on Instagram, of course, I know we share it with Karisa and Always Right. I'm like talking about every episode. Just started this, and I have a descriptive paragraph, and if you read it, it flows. It's flowetry. It's floetic. I do it to
floetry.
yeah. So the way I write it, it's like, hey, here's a tip from this episode of Always Right. There's more in there, but yeah, writer's blocks. I did that for you,
I know.
So, I figured you see the irony in it and you laugh.
Yes.
But if you read them, I read them and I'm like, okay, that's funny. It's it pulls you in. Plus, I'm giving you a tip, but it's got that flowetry to it. So, and it's only a couple paragraphs. Yeah. Whereas Phoenix Earth is a couple hundred pages long or whatever it is. Not that long because I write short books. Right. So there we go.
While we're on these topics of examples, let's talk about some non-examples. Let's talk about some things that people can get an idea of what is not a writing prose.
There once was a man from Nantucket. That poem is not prose.
Yes. Poetry, like we said, poetry is often, it has form, it has structure, it has meter, it has rhythm. It's basically, it's almost like, what was that in the Olympics? It was the power walking.
What?
Oh, you've got to watch the power walking. It makes it look like everybody has to go poop.
No, it's like.
Yes.
I bet. No.
Yes. I'm like,
is it going to be in the next Olympics?
I don't even know. It was like you're not running, so you're technically not singing with a poem, but so there's that borderline. You're not singing, but you still have the rhyme schemes. You still have that. You're still distinguishing yourself from prose. So like sonnets, haikus, things like that. I remember writing haikus when I was in school. There was the 535 and the 575.
Yep.
Yeah.
Haikus, so what I just learned from you.
Haikus and tankus.
What I just learned from you is power walking is not prose.
Right.
Correct.
Power walking, running is not a pro because running would be singing. So songs are not prose. Bullet points are lists. Like, these are basic, of course, these are just brief fragments, your outlines. Outlines are not prose. They're like your pre-prose.
Yeah.
Your outlines are pre-prose.
Scripts, for plays, screenplays, dialogue, stage directions. They're
just formatted differently. They're made for performances, and they're read like they're not read like a book.
Much different. We definitely need to do, and we've talked about doing, an episode on screenwriting.
Yeah, because someone that knows someone.
Yep.
I know a guy.
Yes. Text messages. We know my text messages aren't prose. They're cons. They're horrible. So, or social media posts. But I just said that. So like my Instagram post really isn't prose, but if you would read it in the way it's written, it's very floetic. that would be, you know, an example of
Totally.
writing a couple, like if you're doing an article in a magazine and it was 3 or 4 paragraphs, that would be prose. And
You're
that's what I
trying, yeah,
think.
you're inviting the reader in. You're inviting the
Yeah,
listener in. You're inviting. It's different than if you're just being like you write a sentence like, "Who has an extra plastic pool they can give me?"
exactly. So it's a fine line. If you're promoting and you're wanting to be floetic and pull people into that video, I would consider that prose. But if it's like, oh, you know, I wish I could go to McDonald's, but my car's broke down. Sucks to be me. I'll take you. You see that a lot. So
Mm-hmm.
we're like, I'm having a horrible day. Please pray for me. Don't ask why. Just God knows. So you see a lot of these different type of posts on there
Mm-hmm.
that are not prose.
Right. This one is what I was trying to tell you earlier with the difference between like self-help books, DIY
To,
manuals,
the how
the
to.
technical writing. Yeah. So technical writing, they have the elements of of prose when it comes to some of the things that they're putting in there, but it has to be. It's not as focused on the clarity. It is focused on the clarity and the conciseness because you're conveying this instruction of information rather than trying to create some artistic expression or whether you're trying to.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're not
It's
trying to.
cut and dry and to the
Yeah.
point,
Yeah.
I mean, so that's why that you got to look. And so I guess a lot like Friends of Joe Vitale, he writes a lot of those manuals with self-help. That's still prose. It isn't like bullet point list. Do this, do
Mhm.
this, do this. He's telling
Yeah.
stories from his life. So
When you
he's, but
open the owner's manual of your vehicle, it's not giving you the backstory of what your turn signal is before it
exactly.
tells you how to use it. That's the difference between an instructional manual and like a book that's teaching you educational stuff on. Like, I'm not only telling you about the how the car was built. I'm giving you all this backstory. So you're bringing someone that's interested in that stuff. Like John, his book would be very much like that. Like his book that he put out with the pigeons and stuff.
Well, half and half, because the way we designed that book, if you remember, is I had him dive deep into his story. So
Right.
that's a great example. It's only half prose because the first half of the book is all about, hey, I grew up, this is how I found pigeons and I raised them and da 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 da, how he won the world championship. And then, so it was almost like an autobiography of how he became a world champion.
Mm-hmm.
Then we went into the very cut and dried, here's how you build a birdhouse, here's how you do breeding, how you feed. So, yeah, wow, didn't you think about that? Great example of
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
prose and non-prose.
Yeah. So would that be a nose prose?
Yes, that'd be nose, prose and nose.
Nose prose.
So, what about if you want to decide the prose style for a story?
Yeah.
It's going to be involve a combination of elements.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
We've talked about doing an episode where we revisit AI, and one of the things that I have discovered in AI writing tools, and I've went through several of them. We've discussed Grammarly and Studowrite and a few that we've experimented with. But what I have found is something that it wants to know is to identify your prose. Tell me, the system is asking, what style are you wanting, so it knows how to keep you on point. That is something that you kind of have to know yourself. What kind am I going to go for? Am I trying to be descriptive and narrative at the same time and creative? And I know that when I'm in Grammarly writing a paper for school and I'm trying to get it to help me grammatically keep me on point, because it's not writing it for me, I have goals on the side and they're all the prose of. It's basically asking me, are you doing this academic? Is this an essay? Is this a report? If it's creative, are you trying to tell a story? Are you trying to convince? What are you trying to do? And is this a knowledgeable audience? So these are all kind of fine tuning your prose.
So you would have to start with identifying your audience.
Right. Gotta identify your audience. Who are you trying?
Age.
Yeah. Who are you
Yeah.
trying to get to read your stuff? Are you wanting young adults? Do you want adults to read this? Do you want kind of that blend? Children's book. Well, we talked about this, and when we talked about children's books, your language has to be a little more simpler. Aside from like some novel, you can't have complex structures. You have to put it in like smaller terms.
Correct.
Yeah, determine your genre. Determine the genre. That is important and sometimes difficult, I feel, because you, again, can overlap your genres where it's like, I'm this, because when we were putting books into Kindle, and we were talking about KDP, we were trying to fine tune the best place to put certain books. And so it is important to know who's going to read your book. Not that you want it to be in that necessarily, but what does it really fit into? So kind of know the tropes of that genre, to know where you're going to put that and establish that. That way, for instance, if you're trying to emphasize a certain type of a text and flow that's fantasy, you kind of want to keep in that same fantasy style. If you are a, not that you have to do that, because people do flip it around a little bit, but at the same time, you don't want it to be so much that someone's like, we have said this before, if they're expecting a certain style and you go off key, they're not going to like your book.
No, absolutely.
Yeah. All right, where are we at?
Voice and tone. You need to decide on your voice.
yeah.
Are you going to do it in first person, third person? You want to use which style you want to use. Like, again, is it going to be humorous, serious, reflective? What best suits that story? That voice and that style is going to shape the book. You'll know a little better which audience you're trying to feed to. So you really need to decide these things even before you start the book. And I say that, I don't think I really do. I think I kind of instinctively know it.
Yeah.
And just go at it. And if I'm switching between first and third person, we discussed this before, it'll generally be like an intro or maybe a couple paragraphs in the beginning of a chapter, and I'll put it in italics. So it's like I'm able to switch that viewpoint. And I know people mix it up. That kind of confuses me, though. Unless they're really tight at this, and one paragraph's third, or one chapter's third person, one's first person.
That's how I feel like I would operate. Is I would switch mine from chapter to chapter.
That works.
Yeah, instead of doing it in the same. I don't think it'd be very hard unless you're doing it like changing. We've said this before. Would change it to italicized to know that's the, omniscient point of view, or vice versa. So, which is important. Yeah, which is important with this next point is characterization. Consider how your characters speak and think. When you're deciding what perspective you're doing, you need to know how their dialogue, their internal monologue is going to sound. You have to kind of, it's going to influence your style, your prose, their background, their personality, their emotional state. Like I said, these express the thoughts and dialogue that you're going to carry out through the entire storyline. Like you said before, in some of your books, you've caught where you've done certain things with one person, and Rich is like, "Hey, this is not something your character would do."
Absolutely. I mean, it is. I'm sure we've talked about this before. Keeping track, and I'm sure we'll do it in future episodes. It is so important. You got to keep lists. You got to know what color eyes they have, what words they say. Are they cocky? Are they shy? Don't forget this. And it's so easy to do if you're writing like a series, which is like with me, like Sigil. There's a lot of going back and studying. It's like, oh, that's why I like Pim the Knife, because he's so mouthy. I would have forgot that. There's certain words he says, like yoicks, or I would have forgot that when I'm writing this next book. So got to stay on point with characterization.
Yeah. If the theme and mood, like the central theme of your book. So if you're doing something that is paranormal, how paranormal do you want it? Do you want it super scary, suspenseful, or do you want it very light? Kind of make sure the prose align with the mood that you're trying to invoke on your readers. I feel like this is something that I'm going through right now with Canvas, where I'm switching gears, because in the beginning you have this. I could talk about this first chapter. This first chapter is not going to give away this story. This first chapter, when I was doing it, just the basic realistic, fiction, you have this woman who is waking up to this beautiful sunset. All's well. You're like, this is great. It's beautiful, descriptive of like this sunset over this Cleveland skyline. And then I'm taking you along. You're hearing her inner monologue, and then she realizes, oh my gosh, what have I done? I've got sleep paralysis. I can't move. And like these things are happening, and she's like, okay, I can't move. Okay, this is starting to freak her out. You feel her. You're reading her heart's pacing. You're feeling the sensation of her getting scared. And then she hears someone behind her in the room. You're like, oh my gosh, there's someone in the room. She's been kidnapped. Oh my gosh, what's happening? So you're going through all this. You're not getting very much interaction from the other character other than the words. They're very cryptic. And then all of a sudden, when she makes eye contact, she sees the person, says their name, and it's like it ends. The chapter ends, and it goes 10 years later, and you don't revisit this for a while. So that whole thing was, I wanted it this dark serial killer. You know, you don't know if they're good, you don't know what they're doing, you don't know who the person is they killed, you don't know anything about them except for that little small piece, and you're not going to see that personality at all through the entire book. So it's like, I have to make sure that theme stays in there, that I'm very careful when the killer's happening, I keep that theme kind of consistent. Well, now that I've shifted gears, I want the reader to have a totally different feeling. I want them to see that the character who's waking up is internally conflicted with seeing the sunset or the sunrise. And why is she enjoying it? Like, there's a reason she should not be enjoying this. Why am I feeling joy? Why am I having nostalgia? Things that are not normal to her. So I've totally changed the pace. I have to change the way she's feeling. What would make her feel this before her heart's just not gonna start racing. I can't just say, oh, she saw this and then she's wondering, why is this happening? And now my heart's racing. I have to build the mood and set the tone.
Yeah, but you set the tone for the whole book at that point.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
so you have, yeah. Or like, if it's gonna have comedy in it, like, I feel like I can't have a lot of comedy in my books because of the way I write, but there could be small pieces. I feel like I'm more comedic in short situations of life where I'm like, I can make a little quick great quip in the moment, but not like, I'm not a comedy writer. I don't think I could ever write stand-up comedy. So
Me neither. Pacing. And
mhm.
actually, I'll go back to talk about your book. You got to decide on the pacing of your story. Is it quick scenes with short sentences, or do you have a lot more longer, detailed sentences and it's spread out so that you have more room for descriptive prose? And I feel like that first chapter, you really set the scene. You're very descriptive, but you weren't overly, like we've talked about before.
Mhm.
So it's really pulling me in. Why all of a sudden, why can't she move? Or the
Mhm.
sunlight, and what she seems to know this person.
Mhm.
So it's a whole entire chapter just on really that one scene
Mhm.
within that. And I tend to write really fast pacing, except for like maybe Order of Five. These kids are always battling monsters. It's quick, it's in and out. But there was one talking about the bunker, this underground facility, and it took I don't know, about 5,000 words or so for this big chapter that we did, and it was so descriptive.
Mhm.
Going through, so you felt like you were in this underground bunker. You knew how long it was, you knew where the secret sections were, you knew how high the ceiling was, you knew where
Mhm.
the heliport pads were. So you got to look at your book, whether it's the pacing is long or short. Bottom line, you still got to keep your reader pulled in.
Well,
So
and we've talked about, Stephanie Meyer with Twilight stuff, but with her book, The Host, it honestly, had someone not told me to hold on to reading it for 62 pages and then it'll get good, I probably would have stopped, because the pacing and the overload of information in the beginning was a lot. And I'm like, I don't know if I want to read this, but there was so much. But then once you got past that 62 pages, which is a lot of pages to get through, I was hooked. But that's only because someone said, just trust it, and so you do. Book's better than the movie, but
yeah, I had to read it because I like the movie. Yeah, I've been in books like that, and it's like, and I've actually stopped. I hate to say this because I'm going to get scolded for saying this. George R. Martin.
mm-hmm,
I tried. I mentioned this before. I've tried to
mm-hmm,
read, and I love the TV show, except for the last half of the season. But
mm-hmm.
and
It
I
had nothing to
can't.
do with that.
Yes, yeah. But it was
The
just
book, yeah,
so
past the books.
amazing author, amazing writer. But my brain it's got to get right through the scenes. I want to keep
Mm-hmm.
moving. I got to have fast pacing for me.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, imagery and descriptiveness, like we were talking, this is kind of hand in hand with your pacing. This is the imagery and the description. You have to decide how much you want to incorporate. Rich descriptive prose style can be creatively vivid. However, sometimes if you put too many words, it can be overly vivid to the point you've lost what you're even describing, and you can lose your reader. But you could also enhance it to the reader's experience, where they feel like they're brought in. So there's like that fine line, you know. Whereas like minimalists, like you are more of a minimalist, I feel like, in your prose, that focus on certain actions and dialogue with some descriptions, but nothing that overtakes what's happening.
Yeah, then you lose me. But that's just me. I mean, there are readers out there who love that. They would love this first 62 pages of the host.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So experimentation.
Yeah, we're not
Don't has
taught. Yeah, this is something. Definitely don't be afraid to experiment.
Yeah, with different styles and techniques. There's no. I always say this about singing. There's no sin in singing as long as. Oh, I actually got that from Dr. Dennis Oglu. That's art is art. You can do anything with your voice as long as it's healthy.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with writing. As long as you have that flow
Mm-hmm.
to it, and of course you have a good editor because we all need that. But
Mm-hmm.
don't feel like, oh, I got to be in this one. This is the type of prose I'm going to use, and this and that. I can't sway. No, it's your book. It's your
Mm-hmm.
idea. Have fun with it.
Mm-hmm.
So get that brain dump, get it out, and then come back, and then you can reevaluate.
Yeah, these last two I want to really kind of push. Something I started doing recently is I use my talk to text in my notes. So when I'm thinking of an episode or I'm thinking of a chapter for Canvas, I will turn my talk to text on in my notes and I will talk to it as if like this is what I want to do, and then I'm going to have them do this as if I'm telling myself what I want to happen. Or if I'm trying to like create an outline, I have a whole outline I start before I put them in our notes that I share. I will create an outline first of trying to create like a flow of how we're going to talk about things and kind of push those through. And I'm like, okay, then we could go to this and then we go to that. So I'll just kind of write that out. So read your prose aloud to help assess the rhythm and flow.
Yeah.
Is there an 80s song like that?
I feel like we kind of like when you call me, that's kind of the same thing. Or like when I was writing books with Daniel Middleton years ago, I would call him and tell him scenes like a book like Catastrophe Scroll, and I specifically remember in the beginning days of writing, and he would say, "Wow, you're getting so much better, and you're I feel like I'm watching a movie when you call me and you put out the scene." So just reading aloud, recording yourself, listening back, telling a
Mm-hmm.
friend.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to help you really tighten up.
And I know this maybe sounds silly to some people, but when you say things aloud versus in your head, sometimes like, oh yeah, that does sound silly.
But
I
that's
need
the
to
same thing with reading. Like it's Rich, and you mentioned earlier, read your writing aloud, and
Mhm.
then you'll catch it. It's like, that's clunky or that's silly. I would never say that. Why did I
Well,
use that
yeah, if you
$5
find
word?
yourself like the sentence is too descriptive, you're gonna feel like you're like out of breath almost. It's like when you're reading the sentence. Your sentence shouldn't be so long that you have to keep talking and you keep writing on and on and on and on and on. You're like,
Exactly.
yes.
Like I
Okay.
do.
Yeah.
Seek feedback. And this is good, but it's okay if your mom and your sister and your brother and your friend read it, but
Mm-mm.
seek real
You need
feedback.
a friend that will give you actual feedback.
Exactly. And
That will
that's what,
better.
like, teaching, that's what my students love. They're like, I love it with you because I'm never mean, but I'll flat out tell them the truth when a song, whatever. And they're like, my mom loved it. And I'm like, yeah, but that chorus is not working, so you can't count on your siblings or somebody. There's the opposite end. There are people who are going to be jealous.
Mhm.
You can't write a book. That sucks. That
Mhm.
doesn't sound good. We know that. So
Well,
find somebody you
I have
trust.
so being a stylist, you learn to feel people's um, face expressions. You learn to understand what their facial expressions mean. 'Cause I don't turn anybody around until I'm done with their hair, and so I can see that expression. So I know, okay, like, are you feeling it? Are you not feeling it? What do you don't like? Like, what's your feelings?
How about
Um,
tattooing expressions?
I don't really care. It's permanent now. I'm kidding.
Yeah, but during, well, I'm going, ah. No.
No, if you're gonna whine, that's a whole nother no.
I just did that to entertain you.
Mm-hmm. Because we know who whines when they get their tattoos.
Yep, not me. I
Just
only
kidding.
whined in front of you. Never did it in front of Danny or anybody. We
Oh,
were
well, so
live,
then if you did
Facebook
it,
Live.
yeah.
I had to make it entertaining.
But so what I find is, I, oh my gosh, I can tell when someone is not liking what I'm describing. So if I'm telling them my story, what it's about, I get that whole like, I'm already lost. I'm still lost in what you're talking about. Like when you're trying to describe your story, what's going on to go in the back of your book or what you're writing, sometimes people are like, oh yeah, that's cool. Or sometimes like, oh, that sounds really interesting. I think I would read that. So it's kind of like you that feedback. You can almost feel their energy, like kind of getting disinterested. You know what I mean? My gosh.
I was just seeing if you could tell.
Mhm.
You lost me. No.
Well, if you were paying attention, I said, you get to close this episode out.
Oh, no, no, no. I will never play around with you again. Okay, so your prose is part of your writing style. It's something that incorporates your tone, your voice, your pacing, your flow, and more. And it is uniquely yours. That's why you love certain authors.
Mm-hmm.
You may not realize it, but they do. They have a certain writing style, a certain pacing, a certain tone.
Or even people in that genre. That's why you like that genre, because that is the pace and the flow that you like.
Yes, you love that world, that descriptive world building. So, hopefully you have a better understanding of prose.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess I got to close this episode.
Yes, you do.
We are the Always Right Podcast, and you can find us at allwayswritepodcast.com. We got all these little buttons at the bottom, whether you want to listen and watch us on Spotify or YouTube or Apple Music or wherever, because there's a bunch of them. I don't know them all, but they're there.
Well, it's not on Apple Music. It is on Apple Podcasts, though.
That's what I meant. Apple
I know.
Podcast. That's why you couldn't let me close these. Yes.
All right. Now you're doing good.
No, you know what? All jokes aside, I love doing this podcast. We have so much fun, and every week Karisa reaches out to me and we throw ideas back and forth, like, what about this episode? What about this? And we come up with ideas, and we want to hear from you. We want to know what you want us to cover. Mm-hmm. And if you're an aspiring author or if you're a published author, reach out to us. We love to interview authors. We like to get your take on your writing style, so that you can help enrich our listeners as well.
Yes,
and
we believe in a community that helps authors, not destroys authors.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you have any questions, just email us at allwayswritepodcast@gmail.com, and we will definitely get back to you. And as always, we have blast in these episodes. Thank you for being here. And I am author Jaime Vendera.
And I'm author Karisa DeLay. Thank you for listening, and always write.